As I said last week, I hate Tom and Jerry's boxing. I am sure they will deliver for me smashing face and blood. And this is the boxing. I don't want ring 12 by 12 or something like this for this big fight.
Do you expect him to run like a lot of people?
I hope not.
You don't think so?
I hope not. I hope not, because I think people deserve a good fight. And that's why we are here, right? To make a good fight, the best fighter win.
Now, just to give you some historical context, the Manasseh Mauler, former heavyweight champion Jack Dempsey, won the title in 1919. He and Pancho Villa, the flyweight champion, first recipients of Ring magazine belts. But there were some sections of the sporting world and media who saw his style as uncivilized and barbaric, overly aggressive. It was Dempsey's title-winning performance against Willard which led to the ruling that after you put your opponent on the canvas, you have to go to a neutral corner. Before, when you could stand over your stricken opponent on the canvas, Dempsey took full advantage against Willard, and Dempsey just hovered above Willard while he was on the canvas. And when Willard was in the act of righting himself, Dempsey was hitting him from the blind side to the body. Dempsey reportedly broke Willard's ribs, jaw, teeth. Some historians say it's a little embellished, but that's the legend.
I break bread, ribs.
Now, Dempsey is one of the most popular fighters ever. Make no mistake, but there were sections of media who didn't like his ultra-aggressive approach. Believe it or not, his arch rival Gene Tunney, who took the title from him and then defended the title against Dempsey, admitted he didn't have killer instinct. He didn't like the idea of going in there looking for knockouts, and he admitted this and said, "They said I lacked killer instinct," which was also true. Tunney wrote, "I found no joy in knocking people unconscious or battering their faces. The lust for battle and massacre was missing. And I had a notion that the killer instinct was really founded in fear, that the killer of the ring raged with ruthless brutality because deep down he was afraid." This is a former heavyweight champion admitting he didn't have killer instinct. I mean, it certainly wouldn't fit in the no Tom and Jerry ideology that everybody in Turkey is peddling right now. Gene Tunney wrote out a check for $9,000 to promoter Tex Rickard for the rematch against Dempsey, and in exchange he got a $1 million check. His purse was at about 9,000 short of $1 million, so he's the first recipient of a $1 million check in boxing. Now, Tunney, we're not going to go into his views on race right now. He had no interest in fighting black fighters, even though a lot of the American media, in one of the most racist periods of America, wanted to see him fight Harry Wills. The King of England at the time, whose name I can't remember, he also wanted to see Harry Wills fight Gene Tunney, but Tunney didn't have the stones for it. Tunney saw himself as a little bit of an intellect, quoting Shakespeare, F. Scott Fitzgerald and other literary greats, hobnobbing around the country with the likes of George Bernard Shaw. He was a pure boxer, and while he might not go down as the most entertaining heavyweight champion, he's still an important component when you're detailing the history of heavyweight championship boxing. So basically, you can go back to when they were fighting 20 rounds and more with smaller gloves. There was never a time that boxing just dismissed the science of boxing. There was never a time. There are a lot of commentators on boxing who will lead you to believe that good defense is not an integral part of the science, that good defense is not the precursor to good offense. You'll probably find the most accurate punchers are the ones who actually take less punches. They're attempting to brainwash the masses that there is no real talent to this. But it's not a skill you can switch off and on. Listen to Dave Allen talking to October Red.
I like Ward, I'm a big fan of him, he's exciting and all the rest of it, but when he goes in with a real top-class heavyweight, Cabell, Parker, Joshua, Fury, he's going to struggle because he hasn't got the experience.
Can I ask you about his defence? Can you talk to me about a heavyweight boxer's defence?
Defence is what takes time.
Educate a fool, Dave.
Get a random man in here, yeah? Kill anyone. Anyone can throw a punch in here. Anyone can throw a punch. But no one here that's not trained can defend. Defence takes time. Anyone can throw a punch. Defence takes a lot of time. Anyone.
He explains anyone from anywhere Any random person can throw a punch, but most random people who haven't been trained cannot utilize defense. There's boxers who've been boxing for years and years, still unable to grasp the concept of defense. And I just want to give you a little reminder, while Turki and other commentators undermine defense like, well, anyone can do that, nobody wants to see it, and perhaps people don't want to see it, but it's no less part of the science. The dramatic one-punch knockouts like we saw in Japan yesterday is no less part of the science like toe-to-toe fight of the year categories. It's no less part of the science. I'll do my little bit to highlight an integral part of boxing that some seem determined to erase. Dave Allen is telling you it takes longer to learn defense than it does to throw any combination. There's lots of people shadow boxing in front of their mirror who look $1,000,000 but look more like 20 cents when punches are being thrown back. But if Turki is going to pull this off, now's the perfect time, because with the internet he can get that audience with attention deficit in abundance who don't have the patience for the good things in life. Fighters, they win, they lose, they draw, they go back to the drawing boards, they reflect, they work on the things they were insufficient at last time out and try and improve on it. That's how we get better fighters. That's how we get better fights. You raise the level of the prospect's opponents incrementally. The boxer does have accountability in developing his fan base, shifting some of the tickets, and some of that could be down to the style that he's fighting. Might not be very pleasing, but he'll soon know. If he's a small hall fighter, a small hall prospect, he'll soon know when the promoter can't use him on the card because he can't shift the tickets. And then the alternative might be to put him on a ticket deal, which is illegal according to the British Boxing Board of Control. But it goes on more often than they'd like you to believe. That basically means you're the prospect. Your opponent has been flown in from abroad. Journeyman. You got to cover his travel, food, room, board, purse, and obviously his cornerman has got to get a cut of that as well. So, small hall show, you might have to sell £2,500 worth of tickets, for example. That's the template Curtis Woodhouse used. £2,500 worth of tickets before you get paid, which means you could be fighting for nothing, which is illegal, but the board have to turn a blind eye to these practices. Then you got to go in there and win. Then you've got to go in there, win and look good. The goal is to get the likes of GBM, the Sowlands on Channel 5 interested in you. Then obviously Frank and Eddie at the top of the chain. But how do you develop these skills to get to where Terence Crawford, to get to where Canelo got to? You got to fight Journeyman. You got to fight a varied number of opponents to develop these skills. The Journeymen are going to show you defense. That's their bread and butter. They have to avoid getting cut, avoid getting stopped and knocked out, avoid the 1 month suspension so they can get back in the ring. That's how they eat. You can't be a prospect being pitched in there with some of these experienced journeymen thinking, well, just in case Turki gets hold of this fight, I have to go toe to toe and get him out of there ASAP. These journeymen won't allow you to do that. They just know too much. Their muscle memory is built on defense, survival instinct. You have to be patient. Boxing sometimes is like fishing, but you're learning your craft. You're learning your trade. The journeyman isn't worried about impressive box rec stats. The journeyman can smell your anxiety. He can smell it. And then his job is to take you the distance. Like I said, don't want to get stopped. Avoid the suspension. It also adds to his resume. He took another prospect the distance. And then when he realizes you don't really know what you're doing, then he's going to try and make you look bad. And when he realizes he can achieve that, he might actually beat you up in there and take your record. And it's happened a lot of times. You do realize that the repercussions of what Turki is saying, because he has so much money and influence, reach further out than the elite fighters fighting at Riyadh. You're going to have a bunch of prospects, debutants, who know f*** about the pro ranks, thinking, I need knockouts, I need knockouts.
You gotta learn how to fucking box. You gotta learn how to fucking box.
Even the first heavyweight title fought under Queensberry rules saw the changing of the guard, where the rugged, bare-knuckle champion, John O'Sullivan lost his title to gentleman Jim Corbett, who worked as a bank clerk and boxed at the Olympic Athletic Club under the tuition of Walter Watson, a British professor, is how they describe Watson. There's no footage, but the accounts say the scientific approach was a little too much for John O'Sullivan, and he was outclassed in 21 rounds. And according to history, that changed the perception of what a boxer was supposed to look like and fight like. Jack Johnson, first black heavyweight champion, he was a master of catching his opponent's punches with the open glove, parrying, counter-punching. Although when Jack Johnson employed the sweeter science, the press were not as complimentary as they were to Corbett or Tunney when they came with a more scientific approach. Like Mike Tyson, he acknowledges Jack Johnson was a genius, but he also said this.
Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion, who was admired by the white man for his skill, but reviled by the white man for being black.
For his time, he was a defensive genius. Because everybody back there in those times would just make the fist and just take the punch big time. But nowadays it would be so much difficult to do that because people throw 7, 8 punches at a time. Consistent punches, and one of them has to catch it if you're not elusive with your body. Since he wasn't elusive with his body or his feet, he just caught the punches at the air.
As far as his boxing ability is concerned, is he somebody that you would like to model yourself on?
Well, as far as the way he lives, he was a champion, he fought as a champion, he lived like a champion. But as far as his style, no. I have no great interest in copying his style because if he was a modern day, he wouldn't make a penny.
Why do you say that? Simply because he was too clever?
Very clever, very smart, but very uninteresting. And you wouldn't have to take a laxative or something to fall asleep watching him fight.
Good body shot by Norman.
Oh, he's out cold! Out cold!
I'm Jake.
Sasaki Satomo was brutally knocked out by a left hook by Brian Norman Jr. Sasaki apparently has memory loss. He's not some pug who has been in the game for 15 years and has accumulated the type of punishment where you could possibly expect a fighter to be brain damaged. He's 23. In less than a day after witnessing Sasaki splattered all over the canvas, Turkey doubles down on the Tom and Jerry mantra that he unveiled last week. And this is unprecedented. We've never seen the broadcaster, we've never seen the network, the promoter, asking for blood.
I am sure they will deliver for me smashing face and blood, and this is the boxing.
I'm talking about entering a culture where defense is frowned upon, where we look at the defensive style as boxing as disposable, whereas previously the media and fans may have frowned upon defensive boxers and had a good old moan, but now they're setting templates to attempt to eradicate it. I've heard promoters saying we don't want boring fights. Yeah, we've heard that for a long time, but now there's a demand. Smashing the face, blood. We don't want to have to do the fight in a 12 by 12 ring. And before anyone gets the wrong idea, I'm all about personal responsibility. Turkey is paying the fighters extremely well. And if you want to stay in his good graces, you know what the expectations are. We know Josh Kelly's not getting a phone call back for now. We know that. We know William Skull not getting a phone call back for now. There have been a few fighters who stunk the place out on Riyadh season cards. They're going to get a couple more cracks at it. Devin is going to get another crack at it. Ryan's going to get another crack. Canelo obviously is fighting Crawford. And I'm not making a case against Turkey because I'm subscribed and I'm all in. I want to see smash face and blood.
For His Excellency, you said many times now that you don't want any more of these Tom and Jerry fights where one fighter is chasing the other one. What is your plan to kind of stop these fights?
We will not have it anymore. This is the first thing. The second, we will have in this fight and the next fight bonus for KO.
How is this going to impact on how trainers prepare fighters competing in these 10 and 12 rounders? Do the promoters, the event holders, have any business telling the fighters how to fight just because they're bankrolling the event? Are we possibly right now in the process of putting entertainment before safety? And is that okay? Is that acceptable? Will there be any repercussions for the promoters and the event holders if something goes really bad? I mean, it won't be too hard to put the media case forward if there's a death in the ring or a fighter is injured really badly on a Riyadh season card, and one of the mainstream media outlets puts it together that Turki, at the press conference that led to the fight where the fighter died or was injured, said he wanted smashed face and blood. Because the boxing I've known, from a commercial aspect, has never put that type of pressure on the fighter to put entertainment before defense. And perhaps, unfortunately, we're going to need something to go wrong at our Riyadh season card to perhaps evaluate I demand smash face and blood and knockout bonuses, smaller rings, which are all designed to strategically change how a lot of fighters will approach fights. One of my subs observed all this talk of running and stinking the place out is straight out of the Dana White business plan. You get a bonus on the UFC if you are in a war. Turki is obviously taking Dana's way of doing things into boxing. Even the press conference decor was octagon shaped for Crawford and Canelo. See, the thing is, boxing was how boxing was when Turki entered the game. Boxing was how boxing was when I entered the game. Boxing is not the UFC. When you're fighting over 12 rounds, is it unreasonable to look at the long game, strategize around not getting in a war too early? Boxing is different to a lot of the combat sports. At championship level, they don't fight for as long as the boxers fight for. They don't. The wrestling, an important component of UFC, takes up how much of a round? I expect quite a lot. You can go long periods without seeing a strike on the UFC because they're grappling on the floor. They're locked up and they're wrestling. You lock up and you're wrestling in boxing, the referee's calling break. Fight your way out. Use your free arm to punch out. Is boxing the noble art? Is this the sport that should succumb to the sensibilities of attention deficit? Should it succumb to the this is boring mindset? Will it take away from the individuality and range of the type of boxers who have graced the ring for as long as you and I have been fans? Is this just a temporary fix that might not be sustainable? If Dana White is to have a heavy influence on boxing, ask yourself this: why are people saying UFC is not as popular as it once was? Dana selected who he wanted to fight on the UFC. He ordered any match he wanted, so the fans were never denied of the fights they want to see. Bonuses if you get involved in a war, but yet it's going through perhaps its most unpopular period. This is not a long-term strategy from Turki. You can make the ring smaller. If you like, you can make the round shorter, because that way the fighters will be compelled to throw more punches in a 2-minute round than they would in a 3-minute round, because you have less time to make an impression. How far does this go? And I don't have no problem with Turki and Dana doing what they're doing. I don't have no problem. But this ain't power slap. This is boxing. Are we just going to throw out our boxing textbooks that taught good strategy, defense, keeping your hands up, using your jab, footwork? Professional boxing, the microwave version, is perhaps the next phase we're entering. Hey, these days people like a good car crash to look at. It looks like some people are determined to turn boxing into this curiosity rather than just leave the organic practice, which for the most part is not a boring spectacle. It might not be for everybody. Some of the fights are boring. Some of the fights are slugfests. But the boxing I knew wasn't subject to this artificial engineering where they're trying to make every fight look the same. The sanctioning bodies, the different boards and commissions, the broadcasters have had an awfully long time to fix a lot of the ills in boxing, and they haven't. So right now, it's Turki's way or the highway. But if we're just talking about the aesthetics of the sport, all you've got to do is watch Bivol versus Beterbiev, both fights. You know I'm not great at maths, but it's 36 minutes of actual fighting in the ring, 12 threes. Count how much times either Bivol or Beterbiev clinch, and there's not many clinches. It's either defense, offense of the highest order. I've heard people say Bivol's boring, and I'm going to err on the side of caution that somebody pulls up a receipt on me. I've probably said it myself. You might not have said it, but I've heard it, and you've heard it. Without Riyadh season, we wouldn't have seen the genius of Dimitri Bivol. I believe he won both fights. But Bob Arum, he poured water on a Beterbiev-Bivol fight. He said Bivol was boring. But someone like Bivol needs to fight the best so you can see what he's really about. Someone like Bivol cannot be artificially engineered to be something he's not. And now you're talking one of the greatest light heavyweights of all time, Dimitri Bivol, undisputed light heavyweight champion. The best fighting the best. But yo, that didn't satisfy America. Members of the American media talking about how that fight failed to sell pay-per-view in America. And it seems to me now that Turkey and others are taking this out on the boxers, when the facts are, they'll complain that the best are not fighting the best. But even when they do, they're not putting their hands in their pockets.
People used to give Mayweather slack for running. No, he was boxing because there was moments where he'd step out of range and then he actually started walking you down. Even Pernell Whitaker, if you look on back in the day, there's many moments where Whitaker starts walking you down because he's playing the psychology role. He's not a pressure fighter, but he's looking to mentally push you back so that he gets rest a little bit when you feel under pressure, under duress. Shakur Stevenson does the same thing. He's not a runner. He'll box you on the outside. He'll move when he needs to, but he holds his position, and sometimes he'll walk you down in spots.
And here's the thing. There's people with agendas out there. So when Paulie is explaining about Mayweather, Shakur Stevenson not being runners, that's not going to satisfy a lot of the people who want the runners out. You can get articulate breakdowns from ex-fighters. This is not running. This is not running. That's why it's not running. That's why it's not running. They're going to call Mayweather a runner regardless. They're going to call Shakur a runner regardless. And a lot of times they're going to call certain fighters runners when they're trying to avoid the fighters they support getting their ears boxed off. How do you think they drove Guillermo Rigondeaux out of the sport? Members of the media, fans, and his promoter keeping him away from the quote-unquote prized assets. Well, we don't want to see him running all around the ring. No, you don't want one of them orbital to bone fractures or your jaw broken like he was doing in consecutive fights. And no one really had that dude's back, did they? From when they screwed him out of the big platform at every turn they could. Modern day boxing. This ain't the color line. This ain't the 19th century. This ain't Winston Churchill vetoing Bombardier Billier Wells challenging Jack Johnson. This ain't the colored heavyweight championship that black fighters had to fight in America when the likes of Gene Tunney and Dempsey wouldn't take on black challengers. This ain't Black Murderer's Row. This is modern day boxing, supposed wokeness. But I do have my eye open, watching for another situation like that, and I won't stay quiet on it. I refuse.
Willie Pep once won a round without throwing a single punch. His defense was so impressive, and his command over his opponent so obvious, that the judges felt he had displayed complete control throughout.
Pep fought 241 times as a pro, winning 229 of them fights. He was on the Ring magazine cover several times. The same Ring magazine that Turkey has purchased. And how much of you, when you got into boxing as a young boy, was told about the almost mythical round that was won without throwing a punch? How does that fit in with Tom and Jerry fights? I wonder what Nat Flesher would have to say about all this. He would have been the editor who put Willie on the cover all them times. One of the most popular fighters of his time period. This is how boxing was when we fell in love with boxing. The only issue boxing has ever had is the best not fighting the best, and that's due to promotional and broadcasting rivalries. You bring an unproven quantity into that last Riyadh season card, the Cuban guy, unproven, not a body that the media, mainstream media could quote on his resume. You bring him to fight Canelo in an inexplicably awful fight. And now we've got to ban runners. You could have fought Christian and Billy, who wouldn't have moved anywhere near as much as William Skull. There's other challenges he could have fought with more notoriety than William. And now we've got to ban runners. When Turkey, Kevin Rooney Jr. and whoever else was in the matchmaking process, you were responsible for the forgettable fight that we saw on the zone. You didn't do your job with the matchmaking. You overpaid Canelo for that fight.
It's not going to be smart for you to stand there and hammer it out with this guy. So how do you kind of balance that, not running, but being elusive in fighting Canelo?
However I gotta fight, I'm gonna win. Simple as that. I'm not gonna let somebody else tell me how to fight when I've been fighting my whole life. I won't be running, I can tell you that. But I will be doing a lot of touching.
By letting Turkey know he's going to fight his fight. Styles make fights, not Turkey makes fights, although Turkey technically does make fights. Doesn't make what Turki has been getting at for the last couple of weeks totally go away though, because if Bud is just moving, pecking and a poking, hoping to scrape a decision, how successful will that strategy be? How aggressive is he going to be? How aggressive does he need to be? He doesn't want a situation where he's making it difficult for Canelo. Canelo's struggling to close down the range and the crowd are booing. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that boxing fans believe that either they or Turki should have influence on what type of style they're going to box. If Turki don't want Bud over there, cancel the fight. But as for telling him how to fight, Bud told him better than I could. It's not happening. How are you going to tell someone who in his last 10 fights or so, and we're talking all world title fights, has scored about 9 KOs, that he needs to be more aggressive? This WBC Grand Prix they're doing, what's the format? What's the end game? Are there any fights that I need to see on there? What level are the fighters? This Super League, how much progress have they made on that? And boxing in general, the stuff that the Saudis are putting on the zone, let's say. Is it getting the viewership? Are the pay-per-views hitting the numbers they desire? Is Turki voicing his frustration because it's not going according to plan? So now they're upping the ante on the fighters. Knockout bonuses. We need more violence. Boxing needed someone with the investment to get the best fighting the best. And you have to give the Saudis their due. They did their best to get the best fighting the best. But if that's not enough to reach the targets they're aiming for, trying to mutilate the sport, artificially engineer how fighters should box, is certainly not the answer. If getting the best to fight the best is not enough to achieve the commercial success they desire from boxing, then it's time to walk away. Like I say, mutilating the sport, trying to artificially engineer how the fighters fight. Like I said, aside from color bars, involvement from the mob and other nefarious parties, this is how boxing has always been done. Styles make fights. Boxers, boxer punchers, pure boxers, raw sluggers, counter punchers. Making the ring smaller, in my opinion, is as far as they should go in terms of tampering with the sport to make it more exciting. If you sign up to fight in a telephone box at 18 foot, 19 or 20 plus foot ring, that's your decision. You want to make the gloves smaller, that's your decision. All that can be up for debate. Telling the boxers how to box?
I don't think so.
Boxing was part of the school curriculum in Britain up until the 60s. The generic points regurgitated that they say are redeemable about this is it taught the boys discipline, how to defend themselves. Boxing coaches are responsible for teaching young girls and boys how to defend themselves. First and foremost, not to fight like Arturo Gatti and Ward. Now, what Turki wants to do at Riyadh is no one's business. It's their money. But we got to make a demarcation. You sign up the fighters, you're going to sign up for your league. And you tell them how they're going to fight, whatever you're going to do. Cool. If I want to subscribe to it, I can. If I don't, I don't. But how the sport is structured right now, how it's been structured since 1892, when Corbett beat Sullivan for the first Marcus at Queensberry heavyweight title fight, anyone who claims to be a boxing fan with a modicum of historical knowledge, who believes this is the way forward, that boxers should strategize their fight plans in accordance with promoters, broadcasters, networks, rather than just their trainers and the people they train with daily in their team.
I'm not impressed.
When you get a classic fight, you should be privileged that you got a classic fight. Not because you lobotomized 2 boxers to play rock'em sock'em robots. Birmingham, Saturday gone. Galal Yafai lost his interim position with the WBC against Francisco Rodriguez. I didn't know too much about this guy, but when I done the research, I had a bad feeling for Galal Yafai. I'm not saying it in hindsight. My regular subs will back me up and say, yeah, Beats said this is going to be a tough fight. I wasn't the only one. There were other British uploaders who said this is going to be a tough fight. And a combination of matchmaking, incredible chins, ability, flawed defense, infighting, of which Rodriguez was a little more versed in than Galal Yafai, led to a miniature classic at flyweight that most people are not talking about this weekend. And they didn't have to be told to smash each other's heads in. They didn't have to be told, because boxing is not a gimmick. Fabulous performance by Galal Yafai, the amount of hard punches he took, the output of the Mexican broke the flyweight record for total punches landed in a 12-round fight. And it wasn't scripted. It wasn't choreographed. If you like this video, actually press the like button and subscribe.